mind, but it was a show. Richest man in town. I remember when I came to America for the first time in 1950, there was the funeral of a gangster I happened to see there in Chicago. Good night. You'd have thought it was Julius Caesar they were burying. They had crosses longer than the casket. They had open, carriages behind, stacked with flowers, thousands of dollars worth of flowers. A wicked, violent man who'd been involved in murders and rape and bootlegging and every devilish thing, and they gave him a funeral of a king. Now, which is best, to be carried or to be buried? I thought I was going to be carried away tonight when you were singing. But I knew it wouldn't be, because you wouldn't have got this great truth. But anyhow. It came to pass the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, which was the Jewish conception of heaven. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments. And he seeth Abraham afar. You know, that thing got hold of me. And it still has hold of me. This man is in torment. You've heard me say more than once, I'm going to heaven, and I'm not going for the weekend. And some of you are going to hell, and you're not going for the weekend. I didn't have time. I'd like to have had a piece of paper put across here with this printed in big letters on it tonight so you would see it. Hell has no exits. We read of heaven, there are 12 gates into heaven. It doesn't say there are any gates into hell. Jesus says, quoting what? I think it's the 5th chapter in Isaiah, which he quoted most often from that chapter. Hell hath enlarged her mouth to swallow the generation, to swallow the people that think they're secure and happy. It doesn't say much about this rich man except that he was rich. The poor man sat at his gate. Everybody despised, rejected, forgot about him. The rich man was cast down. The poor man went into Abraham's bosom. Notice what it says carefully here. In hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments, and he seeth. He seeth. You know, people in hell can see. If you were to pull that blind away, don't do it well. But if you did, and there were some people standing out there, they could see and hear and say, well, that's Brother Ravenhill, that's Sister somebody. Those people in darkness can see everything that's going on in this room. I can't see a thing. Somebody might be choking a man out there. Somebody might have a revolver at his head. I can't see. But he that's out in the darkness, the total darkness, can see everybody in here. I believe one of the perpetual torments, remember, it's not going to pass in a weekend. I believe everybody goes to hell will see everything that's going on in heaven. Verse 23, he seeth, he lifted up his eyes being in torments. So he's very conscious. You know, some people try to say, well, there isn't such a thing as hell. A few minutes after the man gets angry, he says, go to hell. What's he saying? Go to nowhere? Jesus spoke about hell 10 times. He spoke about heaven only once. We need to recover our balance. I've said to you over and over again, we are not eternity conscious enough. 12 gates into the city of God, only one way into hell. No exits. It says they go in and out of the city, but nobody went in and out of hell. It says there's a new heaven and a new earth. It never says there's a new hell and a new devil. I told you about a man that lived in the city that I lived in before I was born, by the name of Charlie Pease. He was the Al Capone of our nation. He raped, he robbed, he did every devilish thing. And the cops couldn't get him, but once they got him, he was sentenced to death in the city where I lived. And the judge said to him, you'll hang by the neck until you die, and God have mercy on your soul. Charlie Pease was put in a cell with a guard watching him every moment, because in English law at that time, a man was given 21 days, 3 weeks for what was called amendment of life or repentance. And he was guarded day and night so he didn't commit suicide and beat the law. The night before he used to go to the gallows, an officer came in and said, "Mr. Pease," and he stood up and said, "Yes, I'm Mr. Pease, I'm Charlie." Is that a name for a criminal? "I'm Mr. Pease." Well, he said in the morning, he said, "Yes, at 8 o'clock, I go to the gallows." Put a rope around his neck, put him on a trapdoor, pull the switch. He drops down there and he's killed quicker than being executed. He never failed. 7:45 in the morning, the judge came, the prison governor came in, the prison doctor came in, the hangman, who was Pierpoint, came in, and a preacher came to say a little prayer. He said a mouldy, miserable little prayer. Then he began to walk towards the scaffold, a little room, he had to go through a door, and Charlie Pease was following, and the man was reading. And suddenly he mentioned hell. Oh yes, he mentioned heaven, about streets of gold and angels and everything. Then he mentioned hell. Charlie Pease reached for the preacher and spun him round and said, "What are you reading?" Well, he said, "I'm reading from a book called The Consolations of Religion." Consolations? I'm not concerned about heaven, I'm not going. You just said a minute ago that hell is a bottomless pit. You said that hell is fire that never goes out. You said hell is a death that never dies. Do you mean that when I swing on that rope, something goes out of me away into what you call eternity, and my body goes down into that quicklime? But something gets out of me before I get down to the bottom. Are you telling me that I, Charlie Pease, will be eternally burning and never consumed, eternally dying and never die, eternally in the grip of death and never feel relief? I'm going to be in eternal agony forever and ever? Well, the preacher said, "That's what I was taught at school." "I don't care what you were taught," he said. "I'm asking you, do you believe in a hell like that, where people never, never, ever die?" Well, I think it is. Where Charlie Pease said that was, the city of Leeds is in the middle of England, northern England. Over here you have Liverpool, over there you have Hull. Charlie Pease said if you covered the ground between Hull and Liverpool, thank you. If you covered it with broken glass and made me crawl on my hands and knees, leaving a trail of my own blood behind me, and I could snatch just one man from that eternal hell, I would say, "Charlie Pease, you've done well." I hear people say, one of the signs of the last days is all this heresy. The Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in hell. The Mormons don't believe in hell. Moonyites don't believe in hell. I've got news for you. You don't believe in hell either. We've got a crowded house for once in 6 months. Normally you can get a chair anywhere you like. Are you suggesting to me that either this school or any other school around here would live its normal course if we all believe that men outside of Jesus Christ are going to perish forever and ever and ever? Come on now, here's a man, and all his life he went to church. When they made appeals, he pulled out a checkbook. He's very generous, a soft touch, as you say. He'd give to missions, he'd give to other things. But he died unsaved. He had a fine service. The preacher told lies over him, as they often do when they bury people. And he wakes up in hell, and he looks there into eternity, and there's his precious wife he's scorned and ridiculed and laughed at, and she's at the marriage supper of the Lamb, and he's going to burn forever and ever. That's what the Word of God says. He sees in the bosom of Abraham, he sees Lazarus there. I went to a lovely wedding last week, and the bride came down the aisle looking so gorgeous, and I tried to pronounce the benediction, at least I tried to pray, but I suddenly got caught away in that thing. I recognized this sweet young lady in beautiful white, and then I visualized the marriage supper of the Lamb with millions and millions and millions of people there, and singing such as you've never heard, because there's 144,000 in the orchestra Again, not with guitars, thank God. With harps. I've told you what guitars are, they're backslidden harps. Can you imagine a choir, a multitude which no man can number, and 144,000 in the orchestra? Singing with rapturous delight and watching the bride come? Who is she? She's the bride of brides who's going to be married to the King of Kings. And there's a man mouldy in hell. And he's looking back and thinking how many times I laughed when my wife talked about that. How many times I heard a preacher, I thought it was too far out. I thought it was a kind of a fairy story. Everybody who goes to hell will be able to recite every word of every sermon they ever heard since they were a child. The agony of hell is there's no way out. The agony of hell is that we'll have the sharpest memories we ever had if we get there. He seeth Abraham in the bosom. He sees the man in the bosom of Abraham, other words, in heaven. And he prays. What does he pray? In verse 23, you notice that he can see. In hell he lifted up his eyes, being in torments. Oh, that conscience he smothered now, it feels like a spark of hell itself inside of him. Verse 23 he can see. Verse 24 he can hear. Because Abraham spoke to him. Verse 24, he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus. He may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue. Look, that man's going to be chewing his own tongue for 1,000,000 years, and he'll see people sitting at the marriage supper of the Lamb, drinking the wine of the ages. He has an appetite, but there's nothing to satisfy. All his life he lusted for women, and now he can't celebrate his lust. If you think men aren't idiots, why in God's name do you think they get AIDS? They say it's the most cruel thing that men have ever experienced. It's even more painful than a woman having an agonizing time in childbirth. But that period of AIDS he has for 3 years, he won't live more than 3 years with it. It's just a foretaste, not of glory divine, it's a foretaste of eternal misery.